Welcome back to another episode of Astrology with Alice. I'm your host, Alice Bell, and today we have the Scorpio season monthly forecast. So I'll be going over all of the significant transits happening throughout Scorpio season from October 23rd to November 21st. And I'll be dividing that up week by week so that you can easily refer back to key dates throughout the month. Just before we get into the breakdown of the month ahead, looking back at the last month, I don't know about you guys, but it was super low energy. And I think that has a lot to do with how we entered Libra season just coming off of the solar eclipse in Virgo, which happened at the very, very end of Virgo season. And that solar eclipse was exactly opposite to Saturn in Pisces. So for a large part of Libra season, I did feel slowed down, or things felt just very low energy. Like it was hard to find motivation. So if you felt like that too, the good news is we're now entering Scorpio season coming off of that pleasant new moon in Libra that just occurred. And the topics of the Libra ruled house of your chart may continue to be especially relevant throughout the first half of Scorpio season or so. Another big theme I started to notice as I was going over what transits were happening this month is this theme of the past becoming more important. There are a couple of retrogrades starting. So mainly we have Mercury retrograde, which starts in Sagittarius on November 9th and it ends in Scorpio on November 29th. We also have Jupiter retrograde starting in the sign of Cancer. And in addition to those, like retrogrades are naturally about reflecting on the past and needing to revisit something or restructure a certain area, or reflect on something before you can move forward more effectively. So in addition to those two retrogrades, we also have Uranus and Neptune returning to the signs they started the year in. So both of those planets, after spending many years in Uranus was in Taurus since 2018, Neptune was in Pisces since 2012. Over the course of 2025, Uranus moved into Gemini and Neptune moved into Aries. But this month, we now have Neptune back into Pisces and Uranus will quickly move back into Taurus. So it's like we got a taste of something new over the summer and into the early fall. But before we can continue on that new chapter, there's something about the past several years in your life that you may need to get this like final push with. So looking at, I guess we'll get more into this as we get into the episode, but really key to note, what's the house in your chart ruled by Pisces and what's the house ruled by Taurus, and how are there still some necessary changes or clarity needed to get there before you can fully move on to that new 8-year or 12-year cycle. So that's really important. Just keep that in mind, that this may not be a month where you're getting a lot off the ground and going. It's more about, okay, how can I reflect on what's come before or revisit something that I didn't completely finish, so that we can move ahead and finally get on to this next new chapter. Also, as I get into the transits for the month ahead, if you want a reading on what all of this means for your specific rising sign, and that'll show how the transits are affecting the houses in your chart, that can be found over on Substack. I'm sending out the Substack monthly horoscopes today, October 23rd, so you can find what all of these transits mean for your specific rising sign. These ones ended up being super long, about 3,000 words per rising, so it's really like this several page reading that you can refer back to over the course of the next month and see like how things play out that maybe you can't fully see right at the start of Scorpio season. So it's always fun to like look back on after the month has ended too. But yeah, let's just get right into it. And we're going to start this off on week 1. So Scorpio season actually starts at the end of this week that we're currently in. So week 1 is just going to cover Thursday, October 23rd to Sunday, October 26th. So we enter Scorpio season coming off of this new moon in Libra that just happened on October 21st. So we're entering this next month coming off of this new moon. We're in the building stages of something. So you may have this motivation to initiate new projects, start up new opportunities, pursue different goals or habits or mindsets, or maybe you're noticing that new partnerships are being formed in the coming days. However, there's not a lot of visibility there yet. It's more just like you're laying the groundwork for the next couple of weeks, and closer to the full moon on November 5th, that's when you're finally going to start to see results from whatever you're initiating at this current moment. And the main underlying theme for Scorpio season is, of course, that the sun is in Scorpio from October 23rd to November 21st. And I always think of this time of year as being a more introspective time where you may have heavier emotions that you need to address, or you're being called to open up more and be a little bit more vulnerable in your relationships. Or it could be that there's certain behaviors or mindsets or patterns that just aren't serving you anymore. And this can be a powerful time to either heal those or release them. Engaging in these types of healing activities is not completely easy though. And I find that my feelings, and this is probably true for a lot of you, feelings are felt in a much more intense way during Scorpio season. It's like reactions are just like amplified, or they're felt very strongly. In addition, I also find that there's a greater interest in exploring topics related to psychology, mental health, spirituality, like really wanting to understand what your bigger purpose is or why you are the way you are. So that's really the lens through which we're approaching this next month. But it's also important to note what house in your chart is ruled by the sign of Scorpio, and how are you applying those themes of wanting to go deeper or transform something, release your control there, or just better understand your own patterns and behaviors in that part of your life. So I want to run down just general themes, rising signs by certain elements we'll be noticing. So if you're a fire sign rising, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, this is going to be very much a mental health focused time of the year, where it is a lot about all of these themes we just talked about, like wanting to take more time to be by yourself, really wanting to transform aspects of your own behavior or connect in a deeper way in your relationships. Earth sign risings, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, this will likely be a more social period of the year, or one in which you're dating or spending more time with your partner, wanting to get out and meet people, but also you're applying those Scorpio themes of like, okay, I do want to go deeper in these relationships, or really focus on like who adds value to my life. Meanwhile, air sign rising, so Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, this is going to be a more work-focused time of year for you. So maybe it's that you're trying to find deeper meaning in the work that you do, or a better balance in your everyday schedule, or you're focused on these bigger career projects that are taking form. And then water sign rising, so Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces risings, this is going to be more of a self-focused month where it's a lot about exploring your creativity, certain subjects that you're interested in, just figuring out like what things do you want to do just for you, not to please other people or follow along with what everyone else is doing. So right at the start of Scorpio season, we get this important aspect happening between the sun in Scorpio and Pluto in Aquarius. From October 23rd to 24th, the sun will square Pluto. So this is not the easiest start to Scorpio season. And for this couple of day period, you may want to notice, how are you trying to control something too much in your life? Like, how are you overly obsessing about a situation or a relationship or just something that's completely out of your control? And it could help to look at, okay, why am I trying to control something in my life too much? Or is there a way I can transform the way I'm going about this situation or this relationship? Is there something that's not serving me anymore? And this could be a powerful period of wanting to leave behind outdated mindsets or situations that are holding you back. It's like a period of, it kind of almost amplifies the Scorpio season themes where it's a lot about release and transformation so that you can keep growing as a person. So Neptune is back in Pisces until January 26, 2026. And it's interesting because this once again reignites this Saturn Neptune being in the same sign, and may have you reflecting a lot on what is your relationship with productivity and work, and how are you balancing that with a need to focus on your mental health and rest. And I just feel like having Saturn also here very close to Neptune really makes you focus or establish a greater structure to mental health practices or your approach to spirituality and wanting to take those areas more seriously. So redefining success and what work means to you, and maybe wanting to find deeper meaning in those areas, but at the same time, Neptune's a lot about confusion and blurred boundaries. So it could feel confusing on like, wait, what do I actually want to commit to in the long term? What do I want to be doing in my career? And if that feels totally hazy at the moment, it could be helpful to return back to creative outlets, because Neptune is so much about creativity and like losing yourself in the flow of something that you enjoy doing or feeling a deeper connection to a craft. So it could be that for these next few months, you want to put more effort into having hobbies or creative outlets and finding greater structure with these things, in the case that all this outward success is not happening for you at the moment. Like how can we shift our mindset to be like, oh my God, I'm so frustrated that nothing's happening in my career or other aspects of my life, instead of like complaining about that or getting so worked up about it, finding a way to turn your attention back to your own creativity and maybe a hobby that you're starting at this time or some type of side interest that you're pursuing ends up informing what you want to do in your career several months from now. So yeah, that's an interesting transit. It's honestly hard to explain because it's Neptune and Saturn are so opposite in meaning. Like Neptune is about no boundaries, total connection with everyone in the world around you. And Saturn is very rigid and all about having these structures or this specific way of doing things. So having the two come together, it blends the meaning of them in a way. And just like I said, maybe it feels confusing what you want your commitments or the structure of your day to look like, but it could also be that you're wanting to apply that theme of having structure or working hard at something to a Neptunian theme like creativity or spirituality. Okay, let's now move on to week 2. So this is Monday, October 27th to Sunday, November 2nd. So after the harsh aspect we got between the Sun in Scorpio and Pluto in Aquarius right at the start of Scorpio season, we start to get some really nice connections with transits happening across all 3 of the water signs during this second week of Scorpio season. And before we get into that a little bit more fully, I also want to note that we are getting closer to the full moon in Taurus, which comes up on the following week. So the start of week 3, November 5th. So you can think of week 2 of Scorpio season as a time of picking up momentum. And as the week goes on, you may notice that you're getting busier and busier, or projects are starting to come together more fully, or you're making these bigger realizations about what you want to change or what you want to put more energy into. But going back to the connections across the water signs, so we still have Mars in Scorpio for the first few days of Scorpio season. That's a transit that started several weeks prior. And from October 27th through the 29th, so this is the start of week 2, Mars in Scorpio will come into this exact trine with Saturn in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer. So we have this water sign trine with these 3 planets, and this is all happening at 25 degrees of the water signs. So actually, if you have any planets or angles in your chart that fall right around this 25 degree marker of Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, it may feel like the topics of that planet or that angle in your chart are a lot easier to tap into. And maybe you're noticing like a positive realization or a positive opportunity coming up with the themes of that planet, or maybe it ties in the themes of whatever houses that planet rules in your chart too. But for everyone, you're going to want to look at this trio of water sign ruled houses in your chart. And you're noticing how are the topics of all 3 of these houses, and they're naturally going to share themes in common because their houses ruled by the same element. How are you noticing, I don't know, a boost of positivity there, or feeling like the topics of one house are influencing the topics of the other 2 water sign houses in a very positive way? Like it's easier to accomplish what you set out to do in those 3 areas of your life. So returning to the general themes I mentioned by rising sign at the very start of this, fire sign risings, maybe you're feeling better about your mental health or your ability to connect with people and share your emotions. Or for earth sign risings, maybe it's that you're noticing relationships are flowing much more easily, and that could be romantic, friendship, or work-related relationships. And then for air sign risings, maybe it's that you're able to move forward with career projects more easily, or you're finding greater connection to your daily routine or how you make money for yourself. And then for water sign risings, maybe it's just that you feel better about your overall identity and how you can express yourself creatively and put yourself out there more confidently. So yeah, check the houses in your chart ruled by the water signs. How are those themes coming up in a positive way? But also in general, it's important to look at like what the themes of those water signs are. So water signs are a lot about tapping into your intuition and practicing having greater compassion and understanding towards people, like being there to support the people you care about most. And also just working on your inner emotional self and sharing how you're feeling, or just better understanding yourself and why you have certain feelings come up. And it could also be that maybe you're looking at the past and healing from stuff that happened in childhood, or understanding why something in your past still has power over you today. We're going to get a similar iteration of this same transit later on in Scorpio season when the sun moves to 25 degrees Scorpio and again connects with Jupiter and Saturn, which are both still at 25 degrees of Cancer and Pisces. And that'll happen right around November 16th through 17th. So there's these two openings this month, October 27th through 29th. And then November 16th through 17th, when we have this link between the water sign ruled houses in your chart. And even though it's Scorpio season and we've been talking about transits happening across Scorpio and the water sign so much, there's quite a bit of activity happening in the sign of Sagittarius too. So on October 29th, which is Wednesday of week 2, Mercury moves into Sagittarius, where it'll later station retrograde on November 9th. So I just want to give a timeline because Mercury retrograde will be going back and forth across 2 different signs and houses of your chart, Sagittarius and Scorpio. I want to break down the timeline of the dates of when this happens to pay attention to, okay, this is a major shift happening with Mercury. I need to pay attention to how my focus is shifting at this time, and how, I don't know, what I want to talk about or learn about or speak about with people, how that is going through changes at each of these dates. So on October 29th, Mercury moves into Sagittarius. On November 9th, Mercury stations retrograde in Sagittarius. On November 18th, Mercury, which is still retrograde, moves back to Scorpio. And then on November 29th, Mercury retrograde ends in Scorpio. And then it won't be until December 11th when Mercury returns to Sagittarius, and it wraps up that transit of Sagittarius from December 11th to January 1st. So I wanted to go over this huge timeline so you understand that whatever starts popping up, like becomes prominent in what you're thinking about in the first half of November when Mercury is first moving through Sagittarius, it may not feel fully finished or have clear answers and next steps on what you need to do there until late in December, or even once we get to January 1st of the new year. So yeah, just pay attention to whatever recurring thoughts start to come up around October 29th, maybe even like a few days before that, like already at the end of October. And once we get to January, it may be easier to look back at this time frame that we're in now and see how the things you started to think about more seriously at this time became part of this bigger story that unfolded over the course of 2.5 months. But let's return back to week 2. So with Mercury first entering Sagittarius on October 29th, your focus will naturally shift more to Sagittarius themes like learning, travel, spirituality, wanting to look into foreign cultures more in depth, maybe making bigger progress with writing or teaching work and finding new ways to share your knowledge. In addition, the Sagittarius ruled house of your chart will be a bigger focus, and it might be that you're having important conversations with people regarding the topics of that house. Like, for instance, if you're a Virgo rising and Sagittarius rules your 4th house, maybe you're having a lot of thoughts and conversations about where do I want to live next? Or there's a situation going on in the family that demands a lot of your focus and your attention. And whatever house is ruled by Sagittarius, maybe there's a lot more details that you're having to take care of there, or you're just having like this natural interest in the topics of that house and you want to learn more about those themes. Like, for instance, let's say Sagittarius rules your 8th house. Maybe it's that you're wanting to learn more about how to invest or organize your finances or how you can better structure your own business to bring in more money in the future. But then we have to keep in mind that Mercury retrograde is upcoming on November 9th. So maybe there is something that is bothering you with the topics of that house, or you're having these recurring thoughts that maybe something needs to be changed or restructured there in the near future, but it could be unclear on what steps exactly need to be taken. And right when Mercury enters Sagittarius, it will oppose Uranus in Gemini, right on October 29th. So halfway through this week too, around Tuesday, Wednesday, you're going to feel this the most. You may feel a bit unsettled or anxious, like just having racing thoughts, or you're having a lot of ideas come to you very suddenly, or plans are developing quickly, and it could feel harder to mentally relax. So this is like a time frame out of this week when it may be key to return to mentally calming activities, like maybe a yoga practice, maybe journaling, or just like getting out and walking and taking your mind off your phone or your email, and things that take you away from your physical body. Because I just see this week as just being very mentally on, and maybe it's like forgetting that you have this body, and like it just could be harder to feel grounded in that way. Okay, now we're to week 3. So this is November 3rd through the 9th. And this is going to be the busiest week out of the entire month. We're gearing up for a full moon happening on November 5th. And there's just a lot of transits taking place this week. Like, we're going to spend the most amount of time on week 3 in this whole episode. So first things first, Mars follows Mercury and moves into Sagittarius from November 4th through December 15th. So as we enter early November, we've got these 2 transits, Mercury and Mars, affecting the Sagittarius ruled house of your chart, meaning there's naturally going to be more energy and focus that you're putting into that part of your life. And to reiterate, Sagittarius themes in general that will be felt in a bigger way during this time will have a lot to do with learning and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone with what you want to read or research into. It could also be that travel is coming up, or you're wanting to look into different cultures or eras of history, or a spiritual practice. Or maybe you're even like reconsidering, what do I believe in? Like, what are my core life beliefs, or what form of spirituality do I feel most connected to? And it may be that you're engaging in one of these topics and they don't all resonate, or it could be that several of these themes are applying to what's currently going on in your life in November. But then, like, to get a more individualized approach to your chart, like, how can you apply those themes of learning or spirituality, or figuring out what you believe in to the Sagittarius ruled house in your chart? So if Sagittarius rules your 10th house, then maybe it's that you're wanting to learn new techniques in your career so that you can advance further at work. Or maybe there's actually a lot of travel happening at your job at the moment, or you're finding ways to write and teach and share your knowledge at work. So that's just one example of how to apply the general sign themes to the actual house in your chart. And just like Mercury did a couple days before, Mars, upon entering Sagittarius, will immediately oppose Uranus and Gemini. So this is happening on Tuesday of this week, but you may feel it in the build up to that. So Sunday, Monday, and then lingering a bit on Wednesday, Thursday. And once again, it's going to bring up sudden changes happening to not only the Sagittarius ruled house of your chart, but also the Gemini ruled house too. So to give an example, if you're a Leo or an Aquarius rising, this opposition between Mars and Uranus will be happening across your 5th and 11th houses. So maybe this is a period at the end of October into early November where you're branching out of your comfort zone and meeting new people and joining in on community activities, or finding new ways to bring people together in your life. And it could also be that you're, like, on the flip side of that, you're also wanting to take time to rediscover your creativity and explore new ways of expressing yourself. Meanwhile, if you're a Scorpio or a Taurus rising, this opposition will be across your 2nd and 8th houses. So maybe it's that your approach to money and spending, or the way you look at work, is shifting in a bigger way, and maybe you want to have more independence at your job, or you're finding that there's certain mindsets around your finances that you want to change, and your approach to spending or saving money could be shifting in a more significant way. When Mars and Uranus connect and form aspects to each other, whether that's opposition, square, conjunction, it really speaks to this desire to have more independence or break free from any self-imposed restrictions that you place on yourself. So it's like, I'm done holding myself back. I want to make these changes. I want to be more true to myself, and I want to have this freedom to express myself in a new way. So whatever houses these may be, this opposition is happening in your chart, just know that maybe those themes are coming up super strongly. Next, there is a full moon in Taurus on November 5th. That's Wednesday of this week, and it's happening at 13 degrees of Taurus. Therefore, people with fixed sign chart placements, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, right around 13 degrees, will feel the effects of this full moon in a bigger way. And it could be that if you have planets or angles right around this 13 degree marker, there's a lot of activity happening that has to do with those planets or angles in your chart. And you're feeling like the themes of that planet or angle come up very prominently. And maybe there's a desire to change something there, just incorporate those themes in your life in a certain way. But for everyone, this whole week 3 of Scorpio season is going to be a time of seeing projects come together more fully, hearing back about opportunities, or fostering community with people and feeling more connected in your relationships. Full moons are always when you're going to be like out and wanting to see people a lot more, unless maybe the full moon's happening in your 12th house, and that could be a time of like, okay, I need to scale back and take time to be by myself. But in general, like full moons each month, like you're going to see greater interaction going on with people. Like I always try to schedule social events or community gatherings for my business in the lead up to a full moon, because it's just people naturally want to be around others at that time. The full moon is also all about visibility. So returning to that week when Scorpio season started on October 23rd, whatever seeds were planted, like whatever new opportunities started to take hold, or emails you received, or new relationships that got established, or even habits that you wanted to put more energy into right around that time, you're seeing how they're coming full circle or getting developed more fully by this week in November, the 3rd week of Scorpio season. And also looking at how this full moon is in the sign of Taurus, you may see these very Taurus-related themes of creativity or reflecting on what you value, or finding ways to feel more present in your body and like connect with very tangible things in your life. So how can you maybe schedule a self-care night for yourself, or find a creative outlet where you're using your hands and feeling like connected to yourself in that way? It's a sign that's all about returning to the present, feeling more grounded, and focusing on like what's right in front of you. So how can you bring those qualities into the Taurus ruled house of your chart? And that house ruled by Taurus in your chart, you're naturally going to see more happening there. Like it's going to be an area of your life that's full of activity at this time, or you're making realizations about how you want to proceed further in the near future in regards to those house topics. I had someone recently DM me and they were like, I'm a Leo rising. The full moon in Taurus is coming up in my 10th house. That's the day I'm scheduled to start a new job. Is that a bad time? And I was like, no, like the full moon is naturally bringing up greater activity having to do with your career. And it's like a full circle moment. You've been applying and having interviews to this job. And now at the time of the full moon, you're actually starting that job and being busier likely with, learning how to start off in that new role and like forming new connections in your career. So yeah, I consider the full moon to really be this time of the month where you're seeing things come together in that type of way. Also, the ruling planet of this full moon is Venus. And it's important to remember that Venus is still in Libra, just for honestly one more day, but thank God it's in the sign it rules. So in addition to seeing activity happen in the Taurus ruled house of your chart, there's also going to be a connection that's coming from the Libra ruled house of your chart. And you may notice that both these houses ruled by Taurus and Libra, you're seeing the topics of those houses blended together at the time of the full moon, or there's just more happening in those two different areas of your life. So for instance, if you're a Scorpio rising and you're having the full moon happen in your 7th house of Taurus, but then also Venus is currently in your 12th house. Maybe there's a connection going on between the 7th and the 12th house in this first week of November. It could be that maybe you're overcoming limiting mindsets that have to do with relationships, and you're learning, I don't know, maybe you're also looking at like past patterns that you don't want to keep repeating in dating, or like how can you not self-sabotage when it comes to dating and relationships? That could be a key theme happening for you. Meanwhile, if you're a Virgo rising and the full moon's happening in your 9th house, but then Venus is in Libra, your 2nd house, it could be that you're spending money on 9th house themes like education, signing up for a workshop or a course, or buying books, or you're putting money towards travel, or maybe it's you're finding ways to bring the sharing of knowledge, or topics like public speaking or writing into the 2nd house, like work projects. So yeah, just check to see how the topics of one house might be influencing the themes of another house at this time. And then the day after the full moon, so this is November 6th, Thursday of this week, Venus moves into Scorpio until November 30th. So we have Venus coming from Libra, a sign it rules. It does super well into now being in the sign of its detriment, Scorpio, which is not super fun. And it may feel like areas related to money, relationships, creativity are just a little trickier to navigate, especially because immediately upon entering this new sign of Scorpio, Venus is going to square Pluto from November 7th through 8th. So Venus is not only losing a lot of power, but it's being harshly aspected by Pluto in the second half of this week. So there may be a tricky situation in a relationship that comes up around this time frame, or you want to release a way in which you're trying to control in a relationship too much, or just returning to a theme that I feel like I've kept going over in this episode. There may be something that you want to transform or release when it comes to your own mindsets and how you approach your personal creativity, finances, or how you show up in relationships and dating. But Venus and Scorpio themes that, in general, that you're going to want to note for the rest of November are a lot about like thinking about who adds value to your life, what relationships are most important to you, who is there in your life that you can go deeper with and have these more intimate conversations, or just discuss things that maybe you wouldn't normally talk about in a more surface level social setting. And Venus transits related to Venus also show what you're interested in pursuing in your free time. Like, what is really grabbing your interest? What do you find? Like, what are you curious about under that Venus transit? So here you would apply Scorpio themes, and it may be that you're taking greater interest in things like psychology, mental health. I would also add in like sexuality or themes related to life and death. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but I always get interested with Scorpio transits, like this Venus one, in reading books that are related to death and like what happens after you die. And that honestly helps me to feel more comforted, like there is something bigger out there, or just helps to put life into perspective in that way. So it could be that exploring these deeper topics, it's like that's a way for you to find deeper meaning in your life and not obsess so much over things you can't control or little details that make up your daily routine. Also, even though Scorpio is not a sign Venus typically does well in, hopefully having Venus enter this part of your chart, Scorpio, that Scorpio ruled house of your chart, helps to balance out confusion or frustration that you might be feeling there right as Mercury retrograde is starting up and about to move back into this sign and house. So it could be that, I don't know, maybe you're still finding ways to bring creativity or inspiration into the Scorpio ruled house of your chart, even if it's like you're not totally clear on what the bigger picture is there yet. Oh my God, there's still 2 more transits to talk about for week 3. Week 3 is so action-packed for this forecast. So on November 7th, which is Friday, Uranus re-enters Taurus until April 25th, 2026. So you can think of these next few months as being this final chapter of Uranus and Taurus. And this has been a transit that has been ongoing since 2018. And looking at the Taurus ruled house of your chart, you could be thinking about, okay, how can I make final changes there? Or if you haven't fully seen the shifts that you've wanted to have happen, you may be urged to finally be more true to yourself in that part of your life and do things differently in that area over the next few months, or maybe find greater independence and freedom in that area. And once Uranus moves on to Gemini and like leaves this Taurus ruled house, it's not that change is over in this part of your life for good. It's just that you're going to notice less sudden developments and like dramatic changes than you may have been experiencing since 2018. So for instance, to give a personal example, when Uranus first entered Taurus, that was my 10th house. And so over these past few years, since 2018, I've been totally changing what I do in my career. Like if we went back to 2017, I worked a job in fashion. I had no idea that I had an interest in astrology or that would become my full-time job. But the second Uranus entered my 10th house, these fast-paced changes happened very quickly, and I was learning astrology very intensely, and I quit my job within a year of that transit starting. And since then, it's like there's been so many iterations, even though I've remained an astrologer for the entirety of this transit after that initial big change happened. It's like the way I structure my business has gone through so many big changes still within those past 8 years or so. So it'll be interesting to see now that Uranus is finally leaving my 10th house. Okay, how am I still in the same career path? And maybe changes are still going to happen there. But now it's just like, okay, how is there just less dramatic? How are there less dramatic changes happening in my career overall now that that transit's coming to an end? So as an exercise, look at the Taurus ruled house of your chart. I'm just like thinking I didn't do an episode on Uranus transit stories. So that might be something I start working on over the next few months, because that would be helpful to hear from people on what's happened over the past 8 years. So this actually just gave me an idea. Okay, and by the end of week 3, Mercury retrograde is gearing up to start. It's starting in the sign of Sagittarius at 6 degrees of Sagittarius on November 9th, which is Sunday of this week, and will last until November 29th, where it's ending at 20 degrees of Scorpio. So for the rest of Scorpio season, we have Mercury retrograde continuing. And it's because it's happening across these two signs of Scorpio and Sagittarius, you may see how the themes of each of these houses in your chart are influencing each other and blending together. So for instance, it may be that you have something you need to restructure in the Scorpio ruled house of your chart first in order to move forward with greater confidence in the Sagittarius ruled house, or vice versa. But overall, looking at Mercury retrograde in general, expect these next 3 weeks to feel more slowed down as you turn your attention inwards and reflect on how do you want to restructure a certain area in your life? Or is there a topic from the past that I didn't fully finish that you want to revisit? Or maybe there's a project or opportunity that you're currently developing, but it suddenly gets slowed down with this Mercury retrograde, or there's something you need to review more closely or go back and edit over the course of this retrograde. And that may feel kind of frustrating. It's like, wait, why is this not moving ahead like I thought it would be? Like, for instance, maybe you're applying to a job in the lead up to this Mercury retrograde, and then suddenly it's taking forever to hear back on if you actually got the job. Or for instance, maybe you're developing a piece of writing or a presentation for your job, and you really have to return to the basics of what you know so that you can tell that story or teach people, I don't know, in a more effective or like basic way. I just always want people to reframe Mercury retrograde. It's not a time to freak out, but it's an opportunity to look at where do you need to make adjustments, or how is something that went on in the past relevant to what's currently happening. Like, for instance, I went on the first date with my now husband during a Mercury retrograde in my 7th house. So it wasn't that 7th house stuff was going very badly for me. It was more like more was happening there, but I really needed to look back at like what had come before. Like, how had I engaged in dating and forming connections with people in the past? And how was that no longer working for me? And how did I want to move forward with the person that became my husband a couple of years later? How was I approaching that relationship way differently than I had with dating in the years leading up to that. So it really offers you this opportunity to rework something that just isn't effective anymore. And I always say, like, if you note that a Mercury retrograde is happening in a sign in a house of your chart for that specific year, there's likely going to be more happening in that part of your life for that year. So like, for instance, I just gave that example of Mercury retrograde in my 7th house. There was more going on with dating that specific year than it had been going on the year prior. Or when I had Mercury retrograde happening in the 10th house and the 2nd house and the 6th house in my chart, because they all connect across signs of the same element, this like trio of houses. There was a lot more happening in my career that year. So it's not that it like is bad. It's just that there's probably more developments going on there. So you need to find ways to get better organized or restructure that area. Okay, now we're to week 4. So this is November 10th through the 16th. The main theme of this week is that we are winding down from the full moon. It's several days out from that now. So it's not really a week where you're going to be initiating a lot of new things, like new projects, opportunities, or relationships. It's more about carrying out existing work and wrapping up what's already been started. And it may still be busy especially during the first few days of this week, but as we get closer to like the 14th, 15th, 16th of November, you could notice that you have a lot less energy, or that there's just not as much happening, whether that's in your personal life or in your career, or in another area like home. On November 11th, which is Monday of this week, Jupiter retrograde begins, and this will last until March 10th of 2026. So to rewind a bit, Jupiter first entered the sign of Cancer on June 9th, and that entire transit is lasting until June 30th, 2026, because Jupiter has about a 12-month-long, give or take a couple of weeks, transit. So this is a year-long process of seeing further education, growth, and pushing for greater freedom or wanting to learn more in the Cancer-ruled house of your chart. And because Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer, it could also bring growth to Cancerian-like topics like home and family, or your relationship with your past or your emotional self. But with Jupiter now stationing retrograde for the next 4 months, rather than seeing a lot of forward momentum and a ton of growth happen in the Cancer-ruled house of your chart, you may be doing more reflection and strategizing on how you might grow there in the future. But the visible results of that are not quite happening until that Jupiter retrograde lifts halfway through March. And it could be that over the course of the next few months, you may feel called to learn more about the topics associated with that Cancer house in your chart. And you could be laying good foundations there. But yeah, like I said, really expect this second wave of growth to happen there once we get past March of next year. And it's interesting, like, looking at Jupiter transits in general, how you always get this first wave of growth with Jupiter entering this new sign and house of your chart that happens once a year. And that goes on for a few months, and then the retrograde happens. And maybe it's like, okay, during that first wave before Jupiter stationed retrograde, maybe I didn't see the full results that I wanted to in this part of my life. So that's where it comes in, like after this retrograde will lift. In a few months from now, you get this second wave of growth, and maybe what you didn't see happen throughout July, August, September, and October, maybe that finally starts to take hold March, April, May, and June of next year. So it'll be important during this time to really get clear on what you want to have happen there. And also if you have Cancer placements, or also placements in other cardinal signs like Libra, Aries, or Capricorn, right around 25 degrees to 15 degrees. I guess I should say that in the other order, 15 degrees to 25 degrees of this sign. This Jupiter retrograde will be super important for you because it'll be exactly aspecting those chart placements. And especially because Jupiter stations retrograde at 25 degrees of Cancer and that retrograde ends at 15 degrees of Cancer, those 2-degree markers specifically will be so key. Like if you have planets within a degree or two of 25 degrees or 15 degrees of a cardinal sign, you're really going to see like this surge of growth or a desire to educate yourself on the topics of that planet or angle in your chart and how how might also the houses that planet rules, like let's say you have Mercury at 14 degrees of Libra. So Jupiter retrograde ending at 15 degrees of Cancer would square that Mercury at 14 degrees of Libra. But it would also be important to look at, okay, what houses are ruled by Mercury, Virgo and Gemini, and how might those two houses also be seeing this wave of growth or wanting to learn more and expand in those areas. So you can always take transits to natal planets like one step further by looking at what houses does that planet rule to. And that'll be especially important in the case of like a longer transit like Jupiter affecting one of those natal planets. And then from November 12th through 13th, so this is the middle of this week, Tuesday and Wednesday, Mercury and Mars will meet up at the same degree of Sagittarius. And this same aspect between Mercury and Mars, the conjunction, happened throughout October 18th, 19th, 20th in the sign of Scorpio. So now we're getting this same aspect. It's just happening in Sagittarius now, one sign over. So again, it's like this surge of mental activity or focus or motivation being channeled into the Sagittarius ruled house of your chart right around this mid-November time frame. So maybe that's when you finally start to see a lot more happen there. You're busier, possibly even overwhelmed with the topics of that house. And you may want to watch how your words come across during this time, or again, like feelings of being a bit anxious or on edge may come up, and it could be harder to calm your thoughts. So try to direct your thinking towards those Sagittarius key themes we've kept going over, like learning a new subject, writing, challenging yourself with a spiritual practice that you want to get more into, or more complex information that you want to continue to explore, or maybe you want to brush up on a foreign language or dive deeper into learning about a specific culture. So engaging in all of those areas may help, just if you feel yourself obsessing over a lot of smaller details that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So things this month calm down noticeably by the weekend, when on November 16th through 17th, we get this same water sign trine we saw at the very start of Scorpio season get reawakened. So this is November 16th, 17th is when the sun moves to 25 degrees of Scorpio and connects with Jupiter at 25 degrees of Cancer and Saturn at 25 degrees of Pisces. So I could see the weekend of week 4 being one where you're prioritizing these closer relationships, or maybe just feeling way more introverted, like you want to stay in and you need space to be by yourself and recharge. If you do want to be social and go out and see people, expect to have like more of these like emotional connections where you really want to open up about how you're feeling or be there to support someone you care about. Okay, and then finally, we're wrapping up this month with week 5. So this is November 17th through the 21st. Finally, we get the new moon in Scorpio on November 20th, and this will be happening at 28 degrees of Scorpio. So people with late fixed sign placements, this is going to be a more significant new moon for you. So again, like how we've kept going over, like look at what angle or planet is affected and how are you seeing the new moon themes brought to that planet or angle in your chart? Like how might you see a new chapter unfolding related to that planet or angle, or the houses that planet rules as well. And the couple days leading up to November 20th may feel especially low energy because we're closing out one chapter from the last month. In order to figure out what do you want to put energy into next, like what needs to be released so that we can move forward. And you may need time to reflect or just be in your own space. So that's a key theme for this whole 5th week of Scorpio season. It's like low energy, maybe wanting to be alone a lot more, and just not having a lot of fast-paced changes or developments take hold. If you aren't seeing, or if you haven't already seen bigger opportunities or growth that you would have liked to have happen in the Scorpio ruled house of your chart throughout the majority of this month, this new moon may help to push you in that direction and actually get things going. So it's just interesting, this dynamic we have now of the new moon not occurring until the very end of the zodiac season. It's almost like you're spending the entirety of the zodiac season leading up to the new moon, putting better structures in place or really reflecting on how you want to go about that area of your life. And then you finally get the new opportunities or that new start right at the end of the zodiac season. I mean, personally, I prefer the new moon to come at the start, but it's just interesting to see how the Scorpio themes and the Scorpio ruled house of your chart and the themes associated with that house will still continue to be relevant as we make our way into Sagittarius season. And the new moon in general is a time for setting goals, figuring out, okay, what do I want to prioritize moving forward? What do I want to give my energy to? However, a new moon can also be about endings. So there could be something or someone in your life that you want to part ways with, or maybe there's some type of situation that you're closing out, even if it's something minor, like a job project that's finally finishing, and now you have space to focus on something new. And again, like having this lunation in the sign of Scorpio could mean that emotions are felt in more of an intense way, or you're noticing this like desire to cut something out or transform something in your life in order to work with it more effectively. Like this is going to be a way more introspective new moon than maybe a new moon in like a social sign like Gemini or Libra has been. And again, we're seeing this theme of like, okay, how can we release control in this certain area of my life and gain a better understanding of my approach to this part of my life and learn to overcome patterns hindering my success, and in order to foster like a deeper connection to this specific area. And this new moon will make several aspects to other planets. First and foremost, it'll be exactly conjunct Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. So Mercury retrograde moved back into Scorpio as of November 18th, and it's still in this sign until December 11th. So this new moon happening right with that Mercury retrograde marks the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde. So it may actually help to provide clarity to any situations you're confused by or have been slowed down with during the first part of the Mercury retrograde throughout like this middle of November timeframe. And you may have this moment of clarity or getting this sudden insight into what your next steps need to be in both the Scorpio ruled house of your chart and also the Sagittarius one too, because Mercury retrograde started there. And you may be met with these numerous ideas or new inspiration that you want to keep pursuing over the coming weeks. So maybe like this new moon is a great time to get something established that relates to Mercury themes like communication, like writing, speaking, finding new ways to share your ideas with people through whatever medium that might be. In addition, this new moon will fall opposite to Uranus and Taurus. So again, it may activate this desire for change across the Scorpio and Taurus ruled houses of your chart. And this is like, we talked earlier about how Uranus is moving back to Taurus for several months, and this is the final wrap up of that transit. And this new moon may like help to stimulate, okay, these are the changes I need to finally make in this part of my life. And lastly, the new moon makes a very close trine to Neptune and Pisces, which new moon's at 28 Scorpio, Neptune is now at 29 Pisces. So maybe there's an element of wanting to help other people out with this new moon, or just feeling more in touch with your own intuition and your creativity. One last thing I want to mention with the new moon, and the last thing we have to go over for this entire forecast, is that the ruling planet of the new moon is Mars, and Mars is still in Sagittarius, as we discussed earlier. So once again, this link between the Scorpio and Sagittarius ruled houses of your chart, like that's a huge ongoing theme throughout this whole month. And it may also be that this new moon is re-inspiring you when it comes to the Sagittarius related topics like learning, writing, spirituality, travel. It's a lot about stepping back to look at where are you finding deeper meaning in your life, or like a bigger purpose for yourself, rather than trying to fixate and control smaller details and things that really don't matter. So you could, like, I'm just seeing that as we've gone over all of these transits this month, this push-pull between maybe having this natural tendency to obsess and try to control versus needing to step back and consider, what are you working towards in the long term? Like, what's the bigger picture here? How can we have deeper meaning in a certain area or multiple areas of your life? So yeah, that is the note that we're ending the Scorpio season monthly forecast on. And as a reminder, if you want to know what all of these transits mean for your specific rising sign, that can be found over on Substack. I'm also Astrology with Alice there. And yeah, those come out today, October 23rd. Thank you again for listening. Have a good week, guys.